It is 3 in the morning. Your child is screaming. Not the cry of a child who is thirsty or cold or has fallen out of bed. This is a different sound. You know it by now. The nightmare sound. You go in. You turn on the light. You check under the bed. You check the wardrobe. You pull back the curtains. Nothing. You say there's nothing there. You say it was just a dream. You hold the child until the trembling stops. You lie beside them sometimes, until they sleep again, and then they wake the next night, and the night after. And you start to wonder, not in the way you would say aloud, but in the 3 a.m. part of your mind that is honest because it is too tired to be otherwise. You start to wonder if something is actually happening. Not the monsters you checked for, something else, something the light does not dispel. I want to tell you what Solomon found when he asked that question. Not the Solomon of popular imagination, the wise king, the builder of temples, the man of Proverbs. The Solomon of the manuscript that almost no one has read, the Testament of Solomon. It was compiled around the 1st century of the Common Era, but it draws on traditions that are significantly older. Solomonic oral traditions that circulated in the ancient Near East for centuries before anyone wrote them down. Most people have never heard of this text. It is not in the Bible. It is not in the Quran. It is not taught in seminaries or Sunday schools or mosque study circles. It exists in the margins, in the libraries of specialists, in the archives of scholars who work in what the Academy calls Second Temple Period Apocrypha. And what it contains is this: Solomon did not merely study the forces that attack human beings during sleep. He interrogated them. He called them before him. He put them under oath. He asked each one by name, what are you? Where do you come from? What is your function? And most importantly, what disarms you? And they answered, because Solomon held the seal, the ring of God, the instrument of command that the tradition describes as the first and greatest of all protective tools. And one of the things Solomon found, chapter 13 and chapter 76 of the Testament, was a demon whose sole, specific, entire function is this: attacking children during sleep. Her name is Abizu, also written Obizuth in some manuscript traditions. She is not a general demon. She is not a demon of disease or of war or of moral corruption. She exists, according to the text, specifically to harm children in the hours of their vulnerability, their sleep hours. The hours when you checked under the bed and found nothing. Now, I want to be careful here, because I am aware of how this sounds to two very different people watching tonight. There is the viewer for whom this is already real. Who knows, in the way people who have grown up inside a spiritual tradition know things, that sleep is a particular window of vulnerability, that children in those hours need specific protection, that the old ways of the grandmothers were not superstition. If that is you, what I'm about to tell you will confirm something you already knew but never had the manuscript evidence for. And there is the viewer who is skeptical, who believes in sleep science, in REM cycles, in the neurological explanation for nightmares, and who is watching anyway because something about the title caught them, because their child has been screaming at 3 in the morning for 2 months, and they are willing at this point to consider anything. If that is you, listen carefully, because what I'm going to show you is this: every culture that took this problem seriously, not folklore, not superstition, but the deliberate, systematic effort of people who wanted to solve it, arrived at exactly the same technology. 3,000 years apart, on 3 different continents, with no contact between them. They all arrived at the same answer. And that convergence is either the largest coincidence in the history of human protective practice, or the technology works. Let me go back to the Testament of Solomon. When Solomon interrogates Abizu, the demon of children's sleep, he does not merely identify her. He asks, "What defeats you?" And she tells him. Her name, written on parchment, placed near the sleeping child. Read that again. Her own name, the identification of the force, written on a physical surface placed in the child's sleeping space. The writing is the seal, not a prayer held in the mind, not a blessing spoken once and forgotten, a physical carrier of text, present in the space where the child sleeps. Solomon did not prescribe incense or ritual or a ceremony requiring a priest. He prescribed a piece of parchment, something any parent could make, something that could be placed in any home, in any culture, in any century. The simplicity is not an accident. Solomon built for universality. Now let me show you what happened over the next 3,000 years, without coordination, without translation, without anyone passing the method from one culture to another. The Jewish protective tradition, the apotropaic practice preserved in the Talmud and in the post-Talmudic text known as the alphabet of Ben Sira, which dates to somewhere between the 8th and 10th centuries of the Common Era, established this. Children, during sleep, are vulnerable to a specific threat. The text names it differently than the Testament of Solomon names Abizu. But the mechanism is the same. The protection prescribed is a small parchment, inscribed with text. Specifically 3 angel names, Senoi, Sansanoi, and Samangelof, and the 11th verse of Psalm 91. For he will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways. The parchment was folded, placed in or near the child's sleeping space. Not displayed, not read aloud each night, placed physically present, a material seal in the sleeping space. Jewish families across every diaspora practiced this. Ashkenazi families in Poland and Germany, Sephardic families across the Ottoman Empire, Mizrahi families in Iraq and Iran, Ethiopian Jews in the mountains above Gondar, who had been separated from the rest of the Jewish world for centuries, and who had developed their protective practices in isolation. They did the same thing. Different texts, different languages, different centuries, same parchment, same placement, same sleeping child. And now go to the Islamic tradition. The Prophet, peace be upon him, as recorded in Sahih Bukhari, the most rigorously authenticated hadith collection in existence, is documented placing protection over a sleeping child by blowing the 2 protection surahs, Al-Falaq and Al-Nas, into his palms and wiping over them. But the Ruqya tradition, the systematic body of Islamic protective practice, goes further than that. It prescribes writing Ayat al-Kursi, the verse of the throne, chapter 2, verse 255 of the Quran, on parchment or paper and placing it under the child's pillow. Under the pillow, the same placement, the same mechanism, a physical carrier of sacred text in the child's sleeping space. The Islamic tradition arrived at this independently of the Jewish tradition. The Ruqya scholars of the 9th century were not consulting rabbinic texts. The mothers who placed the Ayat al-Kursi under their children's pillows in medieval Cairo were not reading the alphabet of Ben Sira. They arrived at the same answer because it is the same answer. And now go to West Africa. Among the Igbo of southeastern Nigeria, my mother's people, and among the Yoruba to the west, there is a long-established practice that the English language does not have a good word for. The missionaries called it juju. They were wrong. The practitioners called it ogwu, protective medicine, protective charm, not malevolent, not an attack on anyone, a deliberate preparation of something physical placed near a vulnerable person to maintain their safety. For children who suffered disturbed nights, who woke screaming, who could not be comforted, who seemed to be experiencing something the parents could not see, the preparation was specific, a small pouch, cloth, sealed, containing, in literate families, a written text. In families where writing was not available, objects of protective significance, specific items chosen with deliberate intent for the child's safety, placed under or near the child's sleeping mat. The mechanism is identical. Physical container, sacred or protective content, placed at the child, prepared with spoken declaration. My mother knew this, her mother knew it, and her mother's mother. The tradition did not come to Nsukka from Jerusalem. It did not come from Mecca. It was already there. 3 civilizations, no contact, 3,000 years, the same technology. Physical carrier of protective content placed in the child's sleeping space. If you are the skeptical viewer I described at the beginning, the one who came for the sleep science, I want to offer you the bridge. Children between the ages of 3 and 7 are in a period of extraordinary neurological development. Their REM sleep is more intense than it will be at any other point in their lives. The hypnagogic state, the threshold between waking and sleeping, produces vivid experiences that the developing brain cannot yet sort into real and not real. The neuroscientist would describe what is happening during a night terror as the child's brain, partially awake and partially asleep, unable to access the prefrontal cortex that would contextualize the experience, caught in a threat response cycle with no exit. Solomon did not know the word hypnagogic, but he built a framework for exactly this window of vulnerability. And his answer, and the answer of every tradition that sat with this problem long enough, was a physical anchor, something tangible in the space, something the child is sleeping above or beside. Whether you understand it as a named demon being sealed, or as the nervous system of a partially sleeping child being grounded by the felt sense of something prepared with parental intention in the physical environment, the protection functions the same way. Something is in the space, something placed there by a parent who knows, and the child sleeps. I need to tell you about a conversation I had at Oxford. I was in the second year of teaching a graduate seminar on Second Temple period protective texts, the category of ancient Jewish writing that includes the Testament of Solomon and the protective Psalms from Qumran. A student came to me after class one evening. She was Nigerian, Pentecostal, brilliant, one of the sharper minds in the seminar. She was also, I could see, slightly embarrassed about something. She stood by the door for a moment after the other students had left, the way people do when they are deciding whether to say the actual thing. And then she said, "My 3-year-old hasn't slept through the night in 2 months." I waited. She said, "I know what the texts say. I know the Psalm 91 material. I know the apotropaic tradition. But I don't know." She paused. "I don't know if I'm allowed to just do it." I understood exactly what she meant. There is a gap, a painful and sometimes paralyzing gap, between what we study and what we actually need, between the knowledge that sits in the library and the knowledge that helps a parent whose child is screaming at 3 in the morning. She was a scholar. She had read the texts, and somehow the scholarly context had made them feel abstract, theoretical, not quite available for actual use. I told her what the texts say, not the academic version, the version that is actually useful. I told her about the parchment. She came back the following week. She had made the parchment on the Saturday evening. She described making it quietly at the kitchen table after her daughter was asleep. She said, "It's been 3 nights. I had no academic response to that. No framework in Second Temple studies that tells me what to conclude from 3 nights of uninterrupted sleep for one child in Oxford in the 21st century. I only said what came to me. Your grandmother probably already knew." She smiled at that. She said, "Yes, she did. Let me show you the Zohar's explanation for why the physical placement works, because this is the part that I find most intellectually compelling, and that I think the skeptical viewer will find most difficult to dismiss. The Zohar, the central text of Jewish mystical tradition, compiled in medieval Spain but drawing on much older material, addresses, in the section on Shemot and in the portion of Truma, the question of how certain forces operate. The teaching is this: certain spiritual forces operate through proximity and boundary. They cannot cross what has been sealed. The physical object placed near the sleeping child does not merely symbolize protection. It establishes a spatial perimeter, a boundary. And the sleeping state is specifically, in the Solomonic understanding, a window of particular vulnerability precisely because something happens at the threshold of sleep that does not happen in waking hours. The soul, in the mystical tradition, partially departs the body during sleep. The waking will, the active capacity of the conscious mind to orient, to hold, to direct, recedes, and what the conscious will cannot protect, something physical must protect. The seal in the space compensates for what the waking mind cannot provide, when the waking mind is no longer available. Physical text in a sleeping space is not a symbolic gesture in the Solomonic tradition. It is technology, designed for the specific vulnerability created by sleep, for the specific window when your child is beyond what your waking care can reach. Now let me give you exactly what Solomon's tradition specifies. Not a ritual that requires a priest, or materials you do not have, or training you have not received. What the texts actually describe: prepared once, renewed monthly. 3 layers. The first layer is the written seal. This is the core of the Solomonic method. Take a sheet of clean white paper. Plain writing paper is sufficient, parchment if you have it, but paper is what most people have, and the tradition specifies the intent not the material. You will write 4 things on this paper, by hand, not printed, not digital, handwritten. Write the 3 guardian angel names, Senoi, Sansanoi, Semangelof. These are the names found in the Jewish apotropaic tradition for the protection of sleeping children, preserved across centuries of manuscript copying and community practice. Then write Psalm 91, verse 11 in full. For he will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways. This is the verse that appears in the Qumran fragment, known as 11Q11. The oldest written evidence of Scripture deployed specifically as a protective object, predating the Christian era. It was not chosen arbitrarily. It was chosen because it is the covenant declaration of angelic guardianship over a specific person in a specific space. Your child is that person. The paper is that space. When you have written both, fold the paper 3 times. 3 is the covenant number in the Solomonic tradition, the cord of 3 strands, the threefold repetition of sacred declaration, the architecture that cannot be broken by what can break 2. Then seal the fold. 1 drop of olive oil, pressed with your thumb. Anointing with oil is, in the biblical and Quranic traditions both, the act of setting something apart for a sacred purpose. You are setting the paper apart. You are marking it as carrying something specific. The second layer is the placement. Place the folded paper inside a small cloth pouch or a sealed envelope. Then lay it flat under your child's pillow or under the mattress at the head of the bed. At the child's head, not the foot. This matters. The placement is deliberate. The child sleeps above the seal within its perimeter. This is the same placement the Ruqya tradition prescribes for the Ayat al-Kursi. This is the same position as the Igbo protective pouch under the sleeping mat. The child's head, the site of the dreams, the site of the vulnerability, the threshold where the waking mind gives way to sleep, is placed above what has been written and sealed. The third layer is the spoken declaration. Once, at the moment of placement, stand at the threshold of the child's room. Speak aloud, not in your head, but aloud, because the Solomonic and Talmudic traditions are both specific that intention made audible carries a weight that silent intention does not. Say this: this child is under the protection of the Lord of hosts. No spirit may enter this sleep without permission. What is written here is sealed. You do not need to say it loudly. You do not need to say it dramatically. Say it the way you would say something you mean, because you do mean it. That is all that is required. The renewal is monthly. Remove the old paper after approximately 4 weeks. Do not throw it in a rubbish bin. Take it outside. Place it on open ground or in running water, a garden, a park, a stream. The Solomonic tradition holds that what has been sealed absorbs what it encounters. The paper has been present in the space. It has served its function. It is released respectfully. Then prepare a fresh one. Same paper, same words, same fold, same seal, same placement, same declaration. Monthly renewal is not superstition. It is the same logic as changing the water in a vessel that has been doing work. I want to speak for a moment to the parent who is resistant to this. Not the skeptical parent, I addressed them earlier. The resistant parent, the one who wants to help their child but feels uncertain about whether they have the right to use something from a tradition they do not fully inhabit. The Jewish mother, who wonders if Psalm 91 is only for Jewish children. The Muslim father who wonders if the 3 angel names are for him. The Pentecostal scholar who wonders if she is allowed to just do it. Here is what I know from 30 years with these manuscripts. The traditions that preserved these methods did not understand them as tribal property. The Testament of Solomon was compiled in a community that intended it to be used. Psalm 91 was sung by David, preserved by the Levites, deployed by the Dead Sea community, translated into Greek for the Septuagint, and received into Christian liturgy before the 1st century of the Common Era was over. It belongs to everyone who needs it. The Quran's Ayat al-Kursi was not revealed for one people in 1 century. And the Igbo mothers of Nsukka, who placed pouches near their children's sleeping mats, were not performing a ritual with restrictive entry requirements. They were doing what parents do, protecting their children with everything they knew. That is the permission. The need is the permission. Solomon, in the Testament, did not interrogate Abizu to produce an academic monograph. He interrogated her to extract the method. And the method was not for himself, it was for parents. For the parent at 3 in the morning who has checked under the bed and found nothing visible but knows in the part of themselves that is honest because it is too tired to pretend otherwise, that something is happening. He left the method. It has been sitting in the manuscripts for 3,000 years, copied by rabbis in medieval Cairo, practiced by Jewish mothers in every diaspora city on earth, replicated by Islamic scholars in the Ruqya tradition, preserved by Igbo grandmothers who did not read Hebrew and did not need to. It has been waiting for you to find it. Let me say one last thing about the convergence. I have spent my career with these texts, and the question that never fully leaves me is this. Why did every tradition that sat with this problem long enough arrive at the same answer? Not approximately the same answer. The same answer. Physical carrier, written text or sacred content, placed at the child's sleeping space, prepared with spoken declaration. Every tradition, every continent, no contact between them. If you believe in the God who commanded angels concerning you in verse 11 of Psalm 91, then the answer is simple. The method was revealed because the protection is real. And if you are the skeptical viewer at the back, still watching after everything I have told you tonight, then at minimum you must acknowledge this. 3 independent civilizations, working with different languages and different theological frameworks across 3,000 years, converged on a precise physical technology for a precise problem. That convergence is data, and data, in my experience, is worth taking seriously, even at 3 in the morning. Especially at 3 in the morning. If your child is suffering tonight, if the nightmares are real and recurring and the checking under the bed has stopped working, this is what Solomon said to do. A piece of paper, 4 sentences, handwritten, 3 folds, 1 drop of olive oil, a small pouch or sealed envelope under the pillow. At the threshold of the room, 7 words spoken aloud. This child is under the protection of the Lord of hosts. It is not complicated. It does not require anything you cannot find in your home right now. It has been practiced for 3,000 years by parents who did not know the name Abizu, who had never heard of the Testament of Solomon, who did not know that what they were doing had been confirmed independently on 3 continents. They only knew that their children needed sleep, and that something in the old knowledge worked. Begin tonight. That is what Solomon said. Not tomorrow. Not after you have thought about it more. Not after you have resolved your theological uncertainty. Tonight, because your child may be sleeping right now, and the paper takes 5 minutes to prepare. What you do with this is up to you. But Solomon, who captured Abizu, who interrogated her, who asked her directly what disarms her, and who received her answer. Solomon was not writing for scholars. He was writing for the parent at 3 in the morning. He was writing for your grandmother, who already knew half of it. He was writing for you. Sleep well tonight, the seal holds.